Hello, and welcome to The Good Life, what it is and how to achieve it. Last week, we spoke about control, things you do control and things you do not. This week, we're going to talk about habits. Now, a habit is a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. Now, I'm going to give you several quotes. The first one is Proverbs 23:7. As a man thinketh, so is he. The second one is from Romans 12:2, which says, And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The next thing is from Marcus Aurelius, one of the 5 good Roman emperors. The soul is dyed by the color of your thoughts. And finally, Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for good to those that love God and who are the called according to his purpose. Now you say, how do those things deal with habits? Because the biggest habit that we have that we need to correct is improper thinking. As the quote says, as a man thinketh, so is he. And the soul is dyed by the color of your thoughts. Now, this is important because everything that you do starts in the mind. Well, you say, I don't control everything that comes into my mind, but you do control how long it stays. In other words, the stimulus, an event happens. Immediately, your mind goes to work and you decide to assign a label to that event. Something is good, bad, whatever, horrible, excellent. You make a conscious decision, quickly as you do, to assign meaning to that event. Now, how often have you assigned meaning to an event, and then figured out later that the meaning that you assigned to that event was wrong? That brings us to one concept that we need to understand, because when you do that, what I just described, you're in stimulus, response, and then regret. Stimulus, response, regret. Something happens, you immediately react, and then later you regret because you've learned something new about the situation. When our actions should be stimulus, evaluation, the gap theory, and then response. Because that gap theory is the point in which between stimulus, the event, and the response that you go, wait a minute, let me see what this really is. What is it that's causing me to feel this way about this event? If you can do that self-evaluation, is this something that's regarding something that happened in my past? Is it something that I learned from my parents or grandparents? what is it that's making me feel the way that I do? If you can step back and do that, you're on the first step to thinking properly. So now you go from immediate reactivity to contemplation. What's really going on here? And once you get control of that, then you're able to respond correctly to the event, which heightens the chance of you having a positive outcome. Remember, stimulus, response, regret, or stimulus, evaluation, the gap theory, then response, positive outcome. We have to give ourselves time to consider what is actually going on without the labels, because once you assign a label to something, if you decide that something is bad, then everything that goes along with that connotation is assigned to that particular event. And when you do that, you then go back to Romans 8:28 that says, all things work together for good to those that love God and who are called according to his purpose. It didn't say some things. It didn't say only the things you perceive as good. It said all things. But once you put the label bad on something, you have now closed off your mind to think about where the good in a particular situation is. Now, you don't always have to be, even though I recommend it, you don't have to be a follower of Christ to understand this. There always is a silver lining to every bad situation. You just have to have an open mind enough to see it. There's a story called about the Chinese farmer. I'll kind of go through it rather quickly. But a Chinese farmer had a horse. The horse ran away. All the villagers came, oh, it's so bad. Oh, it's terrible that your horse ran away. And he said, maybe. The next day, the horse came back with 7 other horses. And the villagers came and they said, oh, what a great thing. Now you have 8 horses. It's a wonderful thing. And the farmer said, maybe. The next day, his son went out to break one of the horses and was thrown from the horse and broke his leg in 3 places. And the villagers came, oh, this is so terrible. Oh, it's what happened to your son. And the farmer said, maybe. The next day, the military came knocking at the door to conscript him into military service. But when they saw that his son had a broken leg, they said, we can't take him. And the villagers said, oh, what a wonderful thing. Oh, it's wonderful. He doesn't have to go to the service. My son went to the service. And the farmer said, maybe. Now, the moral of this story is you don't know what the outcome of a situation is. So the farmer and his maybes put him in a position to accept whatever happens and give things time to play out. Romans 8:28 says all things work together for good. Now, it's up to you to take that, stand on it, and realize the manifestation of that statement. That's hard to do because we're so conditioned to immediately respond to a situation. Remember, every event or circumstance does not require an immediate response or a response at all. Take that time to step into the gap, to properly assess the situation, both within and external to yourself, before you formulate a response. Then we come to the renewal of your mind. It is said that Jesus came to set the captives free. And when we hear the word captive, we generally think of imprisonment, locked in a cage, shackled, some sort of physical imprisonment. But the biggest imprisonment and the worst imprisonment is here, how you think. You do certain things without thinking about it because it's habit. And you are imprisoned by your habits. And because you're imprisoned by your habits, you're unable to freely act. You act by rote. Something happens, habit says I do this. Something else happens, habit says I do that. So there's no thought process for you. You go from stimulus to habitual response. And then you wonder why the same things continue to happen. What you need to do is go stimulus, what's going on? What do I need to do? And then response. But you have to understand that renewing of your mind frees you from the grip of your captor. And your captor is improper thinking. Remember, stimulus, evaluation, the gap theory, and then respond. Now, that's what we're going to talk about. That's this week's episode, part 1. We're going to go a little bit further next week, and we're going to talk about how to change bad habits. Because the only thing that can subdue a habit is to replace it with another habit. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. This is Michael Parkman, and this is The Good Life.